Today on Queen Me, I am joined by a coach who has built one of the most consistent and high-performing programs in Division III football. Ryan Larsen is the head football coach at Carnegie Mellon University, where he has led his team to conference titles, national rankings, and multiple postseason appearances. Before that, he coached at Columbia, Stevenson, and Indiana, building a reputation for developing high-level offensive and mentoring quarterbacks and leaders at every level. But what stands out most to me is not just his wins, it's how he builds systems, develops people, and creates environments where performance actually translates beyond the field. Today, we're talking about what it takes to really build a career in sports, how great coaches think, and what separates teams and leaders who sustain success from those who don't. Take a listen. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I can't believe was it a year ago that we had first connected, I think, or a little bit longer than a
Probably
year?
just a little bit over a year ago, but it was a year ago when we did the professional development
Yes.
with the whole staff. So that we definitely are. I think I got like one of those, look back a year ago
Oh,
reminders from
that's
social media. So that
awesome.
yeah, we're definitely up on a year on that.
We
But I
love
think we
it.
connected a little bit before, but
Yeah.
obviously have had random communication between
Yeah.
then and now.
Yeah. And I'm so excited for people to hear, your perspective and all the things as it relates to, a career in sports, being a coach and all the things. So, before we dive in, I think to the thick of it, if you could just provide a little bit of background, because I think your story is really interesting because you've coached across so many different levels and roles. So could you maybe take us back to the beginning about, how your career moved forward?
Yeah, I played Division III football at a small liberal arts school out in California. I always thought I wanted to be a high school coach. I got to college, and that's when I was like, "Wow, I could do this, just this for a living." And there's nothing wrong with being a high school coach, but just realized like I could just coach. So from there, I tried to use a lot of connections that I had developed in the recruiting process, and one of those was with Bill Lynch, who was the head coach at Indiana University. And as a senior in college, I went to the coaching convention and I found him, and I'd been communicating with him, and he was a Big Ten head coach. So not to his fault, but not the easiest to get a hold of for reasons. And then I spent my spring break of my senior year going to Indiana, watching a spring practice, looking at apartments. So just kind of keeping persistent. And that's how I started in the Big Ten. And was very fortunate to work at a lot of great places. I firmly believe you get good or great jobs because you have good or great jobs, and that helps you kind of keep moving forward. And so I've worked at places like Wabash College in Indiana, which we went to the Elite Eight. Went to Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee, which is a top 50 liberal arts school, and we flipped a program there that had not had a lot of success to having a lot of success. That's where I met my wife. From there, we went to Stevenson in Maryland. Very unique situation. I showed up year 5 of the program. And so we just had our first graduating class. And so just kind of getting the program going. And we had a ton of success, went to the NCAA playoffs, won a conference championship there with a really, really young program. And then from there, catapulted to Columbia University in the Ivy League and got to work for a future Hall of Famer in Al Bagnoli, and taking a program that has a lot of history, but maybe not a ton of winning history at that point. And he was hired to kind of flip that program around. And my last year there, we went 7-3 and got the unbelievable opportunity to come to Carnegie Mellon and become the head coach. And I've been the head coach here for 4 years, going into year 5. And I think when you look at all the stops and kind of try to draw your lines, I really, really, value education. And I really, really value how football can work with education to help these young men grow. And so I've worked at places where sometimes I had to use football as the carrot for academics. And that's just hard for me. I want guys that are really, really motivated in all spaces of their lives of being student athletes. And so whether it be, Rhodes, Columbia, Wabash, my personal experience at Claremont McKenna, those types of places, I really just love how we look at the student athlete in all vantage points. And so I, kind of jokingly kind of made my niche, I would say, kind of in the high academic world. Um, and I think it's just because I get to be involved in all the aspects, not just the football. Although I love the football, don't get me wrong. I like, know how their classes are going and jobs and internships and all that as well.
Mm. I love that. And I want to stick to with a minute with, the you're building your career in sports. And that's why I like to sort of start here because there's so many people that say that they want to work, in sports and I love that and I think it's an exciting, space and field, but I'm curious from your perspective because you mentioned that tie with education. What's something that maybe people don't understand, or maybe they'd only understand once they're in sports already, like in that initial
Yeah.
part of your career when you started? What's something
No,
that helps with that?
no doubt about it. I think that a lot of people see what they see on TV and they see the big contracts and they see the big money and the TV and all that. And I really tell people like don't get into this for the money. Don't get into this for the notoriety. Get into it for the things that actually are sustainable and impactful on a daily basis. I've seen people chase the money, chase the logo, chase the title, and they're not happy and some are, don't get me wrong, not all of them are, but many are not, and they don't feel fulfilled. And I just say really, get into this because sports had an impacting part of your life. Like, and so I look at it that way. Aside from my wife, who yet again, like I met her because I took a job at Rhodes and I
Mhm.
never would have been able to formulate that relationship. It wasn't for taking that job. But all of like the most impactful, most meaningful relationships I had in my life were with teammates and coaches. And so that's what I would say. If people want to get into sport, I don't care what sport it is, like you got to do it because of the investment that you're going to put into student athletes and how you're going to see them grow and develop those meaningful relationships.
Mhm.
Um, the money, the notoriety, the titles, like all that will come when you do a great job.
Mhm.
And there's different levels and layers to that. And don't get me wrong, it is a business and it's how I provide for my family, but
Mhm.
I think I keep the perspective on the why and how impactful it is, and then the rest kind of takes care of itself.
Absolutely. And I feel like too, there's this thing where there's a lot of young people that feel like when they are going into this space, they need to check a lot of boxes, whether it's, getting those initial internships or maybe reaching out to people that work in sports or feel like they need to, do certain aspects. Was there anything that just doesn't matter as much as people think? Or, do all of these experiences as everything just sort of add up? Because I'm sure there's things that we might be too focused on that maybe things just happen in a different way, right?
Yeah, I think relationships are really, really important, but more important than anything is your ability to take whatever task is given to you and do it at the utmost of your ability. And so like I'll use a really, really silly example. When I was at Indiana, my first year, I noticed that Deborah, who was the assistant to the head coach, was coming in probably like an hour or two earlier than she really needed to just to make the coffee. And I like went up to her and I was like, Deb, like I'm already here. Like I can make the coffee. Like
Mhm.
just show me how to use the coffee machine,
Yeah.
like, and I'll do it. Like I don't mind. And so it's like simple little things like that
Mm.
that you're willing to take off of someone's plate. I remember when I first got hired in Indiana, like I was an intern. I was
Mhm.
at the bottom of the bottom, and I would take envelopes home with me at night and recruiting mailers and just fold them all night long and put them in. I'd come back and I just drop them at our recruiting desk the next morning because it was just something that I knew I could do and do
Mm.
well and take it off someone else. And what inevitably ended up happening was at the time, our offensive coordinator was Matt Canada, which I
Mm.
know a lot of people in Pittsburgh know Matt Canada from
Yeah.
his time with the Steelers. But Matt was our offensive coordinator. And Matt
Mm.
was kind of a similar story. He was an undergraduate in Indiana that didn't play but coached, and was a GA. And then he went off to coach at a few places and he came back to Indiana and moved
Mm.
himself up. And he noticed I just was always around and I always was doing menial work. And so he came up to me one day and he was like, "You really want to do this thing, don't you?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he was like, "I notice you're around, you're helping." And so he's like, "Well, why don't you start coming in the quarterback meetings?" I was like,
I
"Okay."
love
So
that.
I think what a lot of people lose the perspective on is they think they have to have this like huge, vast base of knowledge and
Mm.
they have to have a million connections and like all these things.
Mm.
But really, what it gets down to is once you're there, you just got to do your best at the job you're given and gain trust from people, and they'll give you more and they'll give you more, and you'll move up. And, not even a year later, a full-time position opened on our staff in Indiana, and I worked completely for free for my first year. And year later, Matt Canada is able to go into Bill's office and vouch for me for that position because I just showed up for a year and just worked. And so I think that that's a big piece of this is like, it goes back to that, don't do it for the money. Don't do it for the notoriety. Just do it because you love it. And the more you gain people's trust by doing those jobs, the more they'll open up and you'll learn inevitably and get those experiences and get better. And then you see your career move upward.
I absolutely love that. You just got to do the work and do it consistently and
Mhm.
show up. I love that. And that might pivot really nicely into, I think, just your philosophies of coaching and how you develop leaders. Because it's interesting when you read about you and your career and what you've done at CMU. I mean, you've had a lot of, offensive success, right? Especially, everywhere you've been. But curious from your perspective, is there, a belief that you hold in coaching that maybe people in sports might disagree with? Or I want to just dive in more into your
Mhm.
philosophies of coaching.
Yeah, I think people overvalue scheme and undervalue people and putting them in the right place. And so I'll kind of
Mhm.
explain that two ways. One, there's kind of this mantra out in football, players, formations, plays. You got to get the
Mhm.
right players in the right formations and spots on the field to let the play actually be successful. And so moving pieces around, moving people into different spots and locations, formationally speaking, so that they can create one-on-ones that are
Mhm.
advantageous for us, I think is really, really important. But I also talk to our staff about this all the time is that the depth chart cannot be linear. It
Mhm.
cannot be number one inside linebacker, number two inside linebacker, number three inside linebacker. Our job is to put the best 11 on the field. And so
Mhm.
there are instances when I've been here at CMU that we've had injuries happen and we've had to make decisions as a staff saying, you want to know what? The next best two guys are not in that position. It's moving these two outside linebackers who are both all conference players back to safety because the next two outside linebackers coming in give us the best 11.
Mhm.
And so it's not only looking at players and moving them around into, positional pieces and slots to let the play go, but it's also looking at things holistically. Like we owe it to our program always to put the best players on the field.
Mhm.
And sometimes the situation will dictate different players for
Mhm.
those situations. But I think scheme is something that people are very obsessed with because it looks really good on Twitter. It looks really good on Instagram. It's fun to talk about. It's what makes particularly football
Mhm.
different is the scheme and plays. And they're great, don't get me wrong, but like at the end of the day, if you don't have the right players in the right spots or got the right 11 on the field, I don't care what play you have. It only looks good on a whiteboard at that point. And so
Mhm.
that's something I want to spend more time talking about the people than the scheme. I want to talk more about how are we getting the right people on the field in the right spots and then allow the scheme to now flourish because we have the right people. And that needs to be an evaluation piece of everything that we do in all of our systems, offense, defense, and special teams. Like we have to evaluate our systems that way with people and then formations or getting that right 11 on the field.
Mm. Yeah, so when you're building out your team or looking at the right structure, what are some of the things that you have to pay attention to early on?
Yeah, so I could use an example when I got hired. When I got hired, I was, coming from New York City and Columbia. And so I had a little gap time between here and, there and moving here. And I met with every returning player on Zoom and just asked a few questions, about 20 minutes per player. I'd ask them about their major and, what they were hoping to do with it, professionally. And then I would ask them a few questions about their football experience. One of the things I would ask them first is, tell me the best part of this program. Why do you love being a part of the Carnegie Mellon football program? And what that really showed me was what was good here and I didn't need to mess with, especially as I found consistent themes. And then I'd ask them like, about the coaching that they've received. And that would give me a lot of insight into the coaches, from the player's mouth, like what type of coaching they had gotten. And obviously I would ask them at the end, like, where can we do better? How can we make the program better? And so I think allowing the student athlete, I mean, their first one-on-one experience with me as the head coach was really not me talking. It was them talking and asking those questions and then taking notes for each of those questions for all 70 something guys that I did that with to then find the themes. And I would go back through it and highlight it and find the themes, whether things that we had to do better or things that were really good. And I think that gave me a little bit of a leg up to kind of figure out how we were going to build things out and how we needed to tweak things um and then in all honesty where the things that were good and I just didn't need to mess with it because when you come in as a new coach you got a lot to do so not wasting your time is important but I think just giving players that opportunity and then I think how they convey it is really important. It's not just the information but how they convey it, the passion in which they speak. You can tell who's really thought about it, or if someone has like maybe just an agenda, like you can just tell. And so I think, having that be a part of the process is really important as well.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I'm curious too. I mean, because when you're going in as a new coach, right? There might be this feeling, and I don't know if this is true, but I can only imagine that you feel like you do have to change everything. Like you come in and you're like, I'm just gonna change all the things because you're coming in new. But that's a great point you made that if things are good, you don't need to change them, right? Is there any feeling when you're a coach coming in, like that you like have to change everything? And is it odd to feel like things are gonna stay the same?
Yeah, so in the different times in my career that I've made moves, um, there have been times, and more as an assistant, where I've had those conversations with the head coach and be like, man, I really need to blow this up and rebuild it. So, for example, when I left Rhodes to come to Stevenson as the offensive coordinator, that was one of the conversations I had with the head coach. Like, I was like, do you need me to blow this offensive system up
Mm,
and rebuild it? And he was like, yes, I want you to blow it up and rebuild it.
mm,
And that was at his directive. So that's what I did. Now, there were some things from like a nomenclature standpoint that I tried to like keep it as consistent as I could for the players so that they wouldn't have to like there was no reason for 60 something players to learn a name for this if they already had a name for it. Like I can be the one person that can change the name. So there were spaces there, but like when I came to Carnegie Mellon, I mean, they had just gone 8-2 and won a conference championship. So like I
mhm,
knew there was a lot of good here. Like over the last 50 plus years, we've won 70% of our games. So like this is a place that has success.
mhm,
So I knew that there were going to be foundational pieces and blocks that were okay. Um, it was really figuring out what those were and what they weren't. But I think if you go into a job with a mentality, especially as a head coach,
mhm,
that you got to blow it all up, you
mhm,
probably know you're in rebuild mode. You're probably
mhm,
coming into a team that went 2-8 or three
mhm,
and seven, something like that. And then, yeah, that's a part of your process. And I think it goes back to what I talked about earlier. Like you get great jobs by having good and great jobs. And like
mhm,
this was a great job. And I had a
mhm.
great job at Columbia. Not a lot of people at 35 get their first head coaching job with a team
Right.
that just went 8-2 and won a conference
Yeah.
championship. And I'm grateful and recognize that. A lot of people, their first head coaching job is usually a rebuild, right? Or you're maybe being promoted from within. So I do know my situation was uniquely different, and I'm grateful
Mhm.
for that. But I think, again, getting back to the mentality of, hey, like, figure out, even in 8-2, there were plenty of things we could do better, plenty. And so figure out what those were.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to get sort of inside your head too when you're making some of these decisions because I always find this fascinating, especially if you're on the sideline, what's going through your mind. So let's first start with just like the quarterback, right? Because you've
Yeah.
coached so many quarterbacks. And I think when we first met, we had a similar conversation about, okay, what is the quarterback mindset? What do you have to think through? You're balancing so many things. So when you see your quarterback or you see a quarterback, right? How do you know when a quarterback like understands the play, but then more deeply like actually understands the situation and that they need to adapt? Like when you look
Yep.
at a quarterback, what goes through your head? How do you analyze that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a trajectory. So when you bring a quarterback in, you're hoping that there's good base knowledge of,
Hmm.
offense and defense and, base schematics and concepts that you're trying to build on. I think one of the biggest differences between high school and college football and then college to the pro is depth and how much depth you can get into. So understanding the scheme, how the scheme can be used to attack certain coverages or certain, defensive fronts or whatever that may be. And then the next layer is situational football and understanding how it fits into certain situations. And sometimes you're carrying certain schemes for certain situations and certain moments in the game. And then understanding now not only what you do as a quarterback, but what everyone else does. And so I use this really simple example. Like most quarterbacks come to me from high school to college and they understand routes. They understand why the routes are what they are and what kind of coverages. Very few come to me and understand protection and understand O-line protection and how the running back and tight end may tie into that protection and how it can be beaten or how we can change or tweak it or check it to stop certain pressures. So like that's a big space where we've got to do a lot of teaching. Same in the run game, they may understand generally what we're trying to do in the run game, but they don't understand all the calls and what we're and who we're trying to influence and how the defense can now stop it. And so I think it's the depth piece. And I don't expect the freshman who comes in to have that same depth piece as maybe a guy who's been here. And it's funny, so we're in spring ball right now. And I've got three freshman quarterbacks that'll all be sophomores next year. And it's like night and day where they were when they first got here to now. Like now they finally really understand their piece in the offense. They really understand for the most part like the routes and how it all fits. Now they're starting to get into those granular details and the depth and the understanding of this is what the protection looks like. This is how we could be exposed. This is what we're doing in the run game. This is how the defense might try to stop it, and this needs to be our answer. And then when we watch film, we talk a lot about, how these things can fit in situationally, but we also talk about, hey, like this is a play that's going to work against this team because this is what they run. This is something that's going to work against this team because this is what they run, but that doesn't mean it's going to work against these other teams. And so if we can help build that depth and that kind of catalog in their head, and those are the quarterbacks that have always been the most special for me. The ones that could do that and process that and bring it all together. Those were the ones that it wasn't just a play call. They understood all 11. They understood what it was trying to accomplish. They knew what may stop it. So we need to get out of that bad play, or we need to minimize the negative result of it, which is sometimes the key to it too. And then obviously like where it may fit situationally throughout the year.
Mm. This is such great points. And one thing I'm curious about too is so when you look at your entire team, I mean, you get to know them so well. You build these relationships. You can understand them emotionally, physically, all of these different aspects. If a game is on the line, right, and you're standing on the sideline, do you know maybe emotionally or just how your team is acting if they can handle that moment? Or have you ever been surprised by maybe how they have reacted? I'm always curious what a coach is going through in that moment because we talk so much about like, okay, what the players might be going through, but for you in that moment, maybe what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think body language is so important. I'll try to use as much as I can in film.
Mm,
Like, I'll watch the sideline a lot from
mm,
that film and point out guys that are engaged and guys that aren't. But
mm,
there's such great tells on the sideline, especially when the game's getting tight. You can
mm,
tell those with their head up versus their head down. Those that are engaged and like have great eye contact and are like
mm,
nodding their head and understanding. Body language is really, really important, and I think really shows a lot. I mean, I say this all the time. Body language is your billboard for your mental toughness.
mm.
Like
Yeah.
it is your billboard. Like if you are Eeyore and you've got the hunched
Mhm.
shoulders and the head down, like you're telling everybody you're not ready for that moment. You're telling everybody you're not locked in.
Yeah.
Um, and when you look at a team, not everyone's going to be on the field at the same time, but like what's that investment level on the
Mm,
sideline? And how are guys interacting and how are guys engaged in the game? Are they in little groups kind of being clicky and talking together and
mm,
therefore probably not engaged in the game, or are they really into it? Like that's where I go back to the film a lot, practicing games and like try to point that out to the team
mm,
and really try to point out the highlights as best I can. Like look how engaged this guy is. Look at this. Look at this. So trying to like kind of reinforce the positive. But man, body language is huge because
mm.
again, it's just telling you what they're thinking up here. And for quarterbacks, that's a really interesting dive because there's the quarterbacks that get too high and too low. You don't want that. You kind of want a little bit of this. You want that consistency, but sometimes you don't want the guy that's just perfectly flat. Like you got to have some emotion. You got to have a little bit of up and down to be human and to inspire those around you. We'll talk about Tom Brady. Tom Brady
Yeah.
shows the fire. Like he shows
Mm,
the fire. Now he doesn't show the dejection really at
mm,
all. And so like that's
yeah.
probably why he's the greatest of all time,
Mhm.
right? Because he knows how to use that. Um, and the 28-3 game is the example. Like he makes that scramble on 3rd and 8
Mhm.
to get the first down, and then they score, and then he goes up to the defense and
Mhm.
says, "You guys stop them, we'll score again."
Mhm.
And then they do, and then they
Yes.
stop him again, they score again. And so it's that body language of like, I got it, I got it, I got it. You got to
Yes.
have the high a little bit. You can't get the low, but you don't want to be like so up and down that it's like a roller coaster. And then it kind of shows immaturity. And that's where I've grown in spaces too, like being too excitable, and try to kind of be a little bit more level and focused in the moment.
Yes. And that's a great point that I guess didn't necessarily think of, right? When you're playing chess, you're at a chess tournament, your body language is just as important because if you make a bad move, right? I mean, how locked in your opponent is, normally they'll see it, right? But if
Hmm.
you're looking 10 moves ahead and then you're like, do this thing where you're like, oh my gosh, why did I have that reaction? Then they're gonna, know, and then they're gonna take more time to think like, oh, what did they miss, right? They're gonna spend more time, etc. So it's staying that composed throughout, right?
Hmm.
And I'm sure you as a coach, like, I know if I want my team to win, I'm gonna be, reaction be like, oh my God, I don't know if they can do it. But you have to stay maintained, right? Keep
Oh
that
yeah.
composure and know that you're going to, be that role model for the team and even your other coaches too. I
Yeah.
mean, everyone's looking at you, and so that's a hell of a lot of pressure, right? When you're watching that from the sideline, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's definitely that component of it, but then I'll even flip it the other way. Like I'm trying to point out body language of the other team in
Mm,
certain moments. And like a very simple one. I remember this to the probably the day I die, but my first ever head coaching game here.
mhm,
We're playing Whitworth,
mhm,
which they're from Spokane, Washington area,
mhm,
and they're here. And somewhere in the mid-second quarter, we're in a pretty
mhm,
tight game, but their D line is just hands on hips, and they just look
mm,
tired. And I'm like going up the offensive line after we were out on the field. I'm like, guys, like their hands are on their hips, like they're tired. And it's only the second quarter. Like we still got 2.5 quarters to go. We are going to be fine. We're going to win this game. We're going to wear them out. Just keep trusting, just keep working. And we end up winning the game like, I don't know, 35-17, something like
Mhm.
that. But like you could see the body language mid-second quarter taking over
Mhm.
and just like using that first time ever being a head coach, like just using that as a moment to be like, guys, like they're showing their weakness. Like just trust what we're asking you to do. Keep doing what we're asking you to do. They are gonna wear out. It's gonna be okay. Because they were a really good team. They were in the playoffs. I think the year before, and then the next year, like they're a good program. And
Mm.
the team had gone up there and lost the year before in Washington. So to use that as a moment is
Yes.
important. But you say about coaches, I mean, we all watch TV. You see the coach who's losing his mind and all over the place, and you're like, there's no way he's locked in. There's no way he's thinking about the next move. He's not, locked in. And
Mhm.
so, I've had a few moments in my career where I probably have been that guy, particularly with the
Yes.
referees, and so got to find that balance for
Yes.
sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like your team I always think about it, right, when, um coaches, if they are, even especially like in baseball, right, when everyone's like, "Oh, it can be so calm," and then they get so frustrated,
Hmm.
right? And it's like we're thinking as fans like, "Oh, I'm so glad that they stood up for it and they're angry." But then you think about that perspective from a player, right? The player might be like, "Okay, we really need to lock in and push and fight for, our coach," right? And then it's the other side of like, well, like he's frustrated, we're getting frustrated. Like that all plays such an important role. That's fascinating to think about how it's developed over time for sure. For you too. I mean,
Oh yeah.
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 And
Definitely
what,
different as an
yeah,
assistant versus a coordinator
yeah,
versus a head coach and then moments and all that for sure.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm curious now too from your perspective about just, sustaining success and
Mhm.
thinking about your own team, I don't necessarily love to say maybe what breaks a team over time, but there are many factors that can influence, success across seasons. And you've had so much success across all your seasons. So I want to hear from your experience things that you've had to protect internally that maybe people can't see that led to your team's success, or just things
Mhm.
that you've noticed that haven't broken over time because you've noticed them early on? What does it mean to sustain success for your teams?
Yeah, I mean, we have to protect our culture. I think that's the most important thing. We have to protect our culture, and our culture can't just be about the X's and the O's. It can't just be about the wins and the
Yeah.
losses. Our culture has to be much more deep than that. It has to be a holistic environment here where Carnegie Mellon is really, really challenging. And my hope and goal is that hour and a half, hour, 45 minutes that the guys are out on the field, like it's the best part of their day, and they're able to put away the lab, the
Mm,
midterm, the paper, the internship prep, whatever it is, they're able to put it away and
yes.
use it. But our culture can't also be just that hour and a half and an hour and 45 minutes. Our culture now has to spill out into that other 22 hours a day that they're not with us, but they're still ours, right? And so how do we support them in all aspects of their life? And so like a great example is like I got a senior this morning who emailed me, and it's mid-April and he's stressing out. He doesn't have a job yet. And he's
Mm,
emailing me and he's like, Coach, I'm not finding anything. Like, can you send out my resume to all the alumni?
mhm,
Can you get this out? And he knows, of course, I'm going to do that today. Just like I had a sophomore D lineman send out his resume last week, not for this summer, but next summer, that he's looking for something in advance. And so I think that we have to protect our culture. And what I mean by that is that we care about these guys in all aspects of what they do because they are more than just football. And we have to protect that. And the second that we don't protect that, and the second that they feel like their only value is that
mm,
hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes at practice, there's too many stresses and there's too many opportunities for them to go be great in other spaces of their lives that football won't be a priority.
mm,
And so, how do we support that other 22 hours, but at the same time, when they're with us, how are we using that time to be the best part of their day? How are we as efficient as
Mm,
possible? How are we creating a competitive environment that they're improving and they're getting better and they're pushing each other so that they can have the success that they want to have on the field? And I think what usually deteriorates teams is the counter of that.
yeah.
It's when people have ulterior motives. It's when selfishness kind of sets in. It's when, you know, players feel, from a coaching standpoint, players feel like the coaches aren't invested,
Mm,
in everything that they do, that they only care about them from a football standpoint. So like a couple small things that we do here is like when I walk by a player who, let's say, is injured, like I don't ask them, how's your leg?
oh,
Like I ask, hey, how you doing? How's school? Like,
mm,
how's your family? How's all that? And then eventually I can ask how his
yeah.
injury is. But if I define him by the injury
Mm,
right off the bat, all I'm saying is I just want to know when you're back and healthy.
yeah.
I'm not actually saying how's your leg, like how are you feeling? I want to know when are you going to get back? But if I'm invested in them, like, hey, like, I know being injured sucks. Like, how's your
Mm,
mental? You doing okay?
yeah.
Like, how you doing in school? Like, everything going okay? You balancing it all? Like, how can we support you? How's rehab going? Like, now we're able to show that we care in all aspects.
Mm,
And I used to get caught a lot as a coach, like doing the first, like, how's your leg? How's your injury? How's rehab going? Like,
yeah.
because that's naturally where your head goes. And so being intentional outside of football time when we interact with our student athletes, that it's not about football off the bat, creates an environment, creates a culture, creates relationships where now when we ask them to do things football wise and when we push them, they know that we're invested beyond that and they're
Mm,
willing to work and willing to do the things that we need them to do to be successful.
I love that. Yeah, it shows you're valuing them as a human, right? And
Absolutely.
all they can do holistically. Yeah, I feel like that's not talked enough about is that holisticness, right? Understanding that you care about them on all these different levels, right? And if they have something going on in their personal life, that's of course going to impact how
Mhm.
they play, how they show up. Um, absolutely, absolutely. So would you think that, just your experience at CMU or, maybe this is I'm curious now, framing it this way. What have students taught you or your athletes about leadership maybe now that you didn't know early on in your career?
Yeah, that's a great one. I think nothing, this is as funny as this sounds, nothing changed me more than having my daughter Charlotte. Um, when I was a younger coach, man, I was tough and I was
Mhm.
super, super high energy
Yeah.
and I was hard. Um, and I was hard on players. I get after them and probably a little too much.
Mhm.
And I think having a daughter and stepping back and being like, wow, that's someone's kid, right? And they're going through something too, and they've got stuff beyond this time I see them at football that affects them, really changing. So I think that the difference now is like I'll still get after a guy in
Yeah.
practice. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm still gonna hold him accountable. I'm still gonna, be tough, but I think it's the what I do after that's the difference now.
Mhm.
I think going up to them after and being like, hey, like if I don't hold you to this standard, how do I hold anyone to a standard? Especially our best
Mhm.
players. Like
100%.
if I, and so I think making like I have a really, really talented freshman wide receiver who'll be a sophomore next year. And his older brother's on our team and one of our best wide receivers as well. And I remember getting after him pretty hard, like late in the season. Like last year wasn't everything we wanted it to be. And, we're very fortunate to be a place where you go 6-5 and, lose a lot of close games and everybody's like the sky's falling.
Yes.
And he wasn't practicing hard and he was kind of screwing around and I got after him and it was a walkthrough before practice even started. Like he just wasn't locked in. And I go up to him about 30 minutes later in the middle of practice and I kind of put my arm around him. I'm like, that I expect more out of you. And if I don't hold you accountable and you're a freshman starting and playing over a lot of people, what does it tell to everybody else? That if I just let you get away with it? And he's like, no, no, I get it. I get it. And I think that that's the piece that I probably have grown the most is
Mm,
that like the recognizing the teachable moment in it and not just being like really, really upset and volatile and angry and pushing and push and push and push and push. There's got to be a push and then there's got to be a pull them back a little bit. And then you got
yeah,
to push them again. You got to pull them back a little bit. And what I mean by pull them back is pull them back towards you and give them the why you did that and how it's going to help them. And I think that's probably where I've grown the most. And I think it's come back to like the idea of they're someone's kid. They're here because they want to be here. If they don't want to be here, they won't be here. Like we're not holding them to a scholarship,
100%.
right? And so how are we making sure that we're pushing them, right? And I say it all the time, like the day that I stop pushing you, the day I start ignoring you, that's the day you should be concerned. Um, but I think having that push pull is a really interesting and important dynamic that I have on an individual level. And then sometimes I have to have it with the team too.
Yeah.
I gotta kind of push them and I gotta pull them back and be like, guys, like I got after you today. I don't want to get after you, but you gotta understand, like it's my job to uphold the standard and to hold you guys to it. And that's all of us together. And that's the accountability piece that makes us be successful.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And it was because your daughter, I mean, helped
Yeah.
instill that. I love that. I love
She's
that.
Charlotte. Charlotte's the queen.
I love that. And that's so important too. I mean, how your perspective changes and it's like you are pushing them because you know they can be even greater,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And that's the core of it, right? And I love that. That's incredible. It's incredible. I love to end every episode with this question, and I'm curious your response because we've had a lot of interesting ones, and I think the way that it's framed sometimes throws people off, but we'll see what you think. What does it mean to unleash your inner queen when it comes to leadership, decision making, coaching, or just building teams that really last?
Yeah. I would say never be satisfied.
Mm,
Never be content with anything. There's always an opportunity to get better in some space, somewhere, some way. As cliche as it may sound, we have to find a way to get better every day.
mm,
And for me, being in charge of a college football program, there's a lot of different ways I look at how we could get better. How do we get better in recruiting?
yeah.
How do we get better in development? How do we get better in, schematics? How do we get better in organization? How do we get better in professional development? But we're always looking for an edge. We're always looking for something that just makes us a little bit better, a little bit different, a little bit more unique than our competitor, but not focusing on them, focusing on us. And so, yeah, to me, I just think never being satisfied is really, really important. I think the second that we rest back on our laurels and think about how great we are is the second that someone else is probably pushing and gaining on us or creating a gap between us. And so I just really want to find a way, no matter what aspect, what we're doing before I got on this recording, like sent to the staff, like these are the things we need to get done by noon today because I want to send this message out to these recruits. Because if we do these things, then we can get more of these kids on campus. I mean, I think just always finding that way to keep getting better. And I think that allows us to always be in a state, not of stress, but a state of
Mhm.
we're always moving forward. We
Yes.
walk out of here every day and say, okay, we did these things to get better today. These were the objectives. These were the things that we needed to get done. And we're that much better in those aspects now. And we're not going to touch every aspect every
Mhm.
day. And times of year is going to change the focal points. Um, but if we're always consistently trying to find a way to keep moving forward, gain that edge, get better, I think that'll inherently keep us from being
Mhm.
satisfied, keep us from being content. And that'll keep moving us forward because we're always in that thirst, for new knowledge, new ways to get better.
I love it. This has been so wonderful, and I'm sure so many people will value, hearing your perspective. If there are any young leaders or people interested in sports that maybe want to get in touch with you, can they? What's the best way?
Yeah, just shoot me an email. My email's on our website. I'm a 20 or less emails in my inbox type of
Yes.
person. I can't handle having too
No,
many. So no, please just shoot me an email. All of my contact information's on our website. But email, I'm very active, so happy to converse. I've followed up at a lot of different clinics and stuff like that with coaches as well. So anyone who has questions, I'm happy to jump on a Zoom or connect further on things.
I love it. This is great. And we'll, of course, include, any info in the description. But thank you so much for taking the time and for, just explaining just your philosophies and all the work that you do. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Ashley. Appreciate it.
Today's episode is a reminder that success in sports is never just about talent. It's about how you think, how you prepare, and how you lead when the moment requires it. We're so grateful for Coach, who's just building these programs and this team every day, developing players who understand how to perform, make decisions, and lead beyond the game. I always say that, whether or not you're in sports, the lesson is the same. The way you make decisions under pressure defies what comes next. So, as always, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. Every time you do, you help somebody think differently, move with intention, and unleash their inner queen. Thank you.